wide open question. What is life like for you right now?
So I need to be mindful that I don't take, so there's
Yeah.
all these decisions that go into something as simple as ordering food. Sometimes
Yeah.
I think it is kind of a superpower, like you said, because like I would always know I was getting sick before I really showed the first symptom. Islet cell transplant happens once, sometimes
Hmm. Hmm.
twice if patients need a second one.
Okay.
But the islet cell transplant happens once. So I had that done in January.
Welcome to the show. You are here with Type 1 and Midlife, and I am very thrilled to have Katie Beth Hand here to talk with us today. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely, Melissa. Thank you so much for having me.
Let's give my listeners may be living under a rock. I don't know. Give us a little bit of a recap of who you are, where you're from, and why you are so known in the type 1 community right now. Something to
Sure.
do with an islet cell transplant or
Something
something
to
like
do with
that.
that.
Something to do with that.
Yes. So, like you said, my name is Katie Beth Hand. I actually live in Little Rock, Arkansas. I am married to a very wonderful, handsome man. We have 4 beautiful children, and I actually run an estate planning law firm. So, my day work has nothing to do with type 1. That's my unpaid side job, is talking about type 1. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in 2013 as a young single 26-year-old and had to kind of go through the process of figuring out who I was, going from this young, free-spirited 26-year-old to this responsible adult in charge of keeping herself alive all day and needing insurance. And how do you really take care of your health? And that has been a journey that I've still been on, all of these years since. And most recently, about a year and a half ago now, I applied to be part of the Eledon clinical trial. And the way that trial works, it runs through the University of Chicago Medical, and patients receive an islet cell transplant. And then they protect those islets with, instead of the traditional medications that are used for anti-rejection, they use the trial drug, which is, and I'll say this for us all, tegoprubart. Terrible name.
Mhm.
It is an anti-CD ligand. So in layman's terms, the reason that tegoprubart is exciting and different is because instead of suppressing the entire immune system and opening you up to a lot of different things, it really is a very targeted immunosuppressant. So it's shown to do a really good job at protecting those islet cells from your immune system
Mhm.
while not causing kidney damage and not causing neurotoxicity and not causing a lot of these things that traditional immunosuppressant medications cause. And
Yeah.
so that's the reason this trial is a big deal. It's a huge step towards, the goal one day is no immunosuppression, right?
Mhm.
But this is a huge step in that direction. And so I received my islet cell transplant on January 13th, 2026. Exactly 1 week later, they took me off all basal insulin. And then I try not to cry when I say this. And then I've had no insulin since March 3rd. So just over a month and 4 days since I've
Okay.
taken any insulin at all. So since January has really been a physical and emotional process of
Mm.
going through the steps I never thought I would go through to actually become undiabetic again. And that has been quite the journey.
Undiabetic. I like that. That's a cool term. That's really good. And you may not know too much about me. So you're 13 years. Well, you were 13 years. You're now on the other side of being classified undiabetic. I'm coming up on 44 years. Incredible, right?
How old were you at diagnosis?
Yeah, I was 14.
Okay.
14. Yeah, I'm coming up on 59 years here on this earth. I think there's so many things to think about with this, not only living with it, but also hoping that there's going to be a day where we don't have to get up and think about it anymore. I mean, again, we don't have to say this. This disease is constant. And some days are more constant than others. And, obviously you knew that. And, I think at this stage of my life, one of the big things that we talk a lot about here on the show is the hormonal impact of everything going on. So that may be something that I'm sure you were experiencing. You're in that age where obviously, and you've had pregnancies. So,
Yes.
you know all those different changes. But I think one of the things that I really like to strive for is obviously to look ahead and to feel hopeful for what can be. The best is yet to come, right? In a lot of
Yes.
ways. But
Yes.
while we're here on earth, the best can be yet to come. And but to still appreciate what we're able to do. And, I love the fact that this has been a hot thing. Not only what you're going through, you're number 9 as far as out of 12. Is it 12 of you
It
total?
was originally 10, and then they expanded it to 12, so I'm
Okay.
9 out of 12 now, yeah.
And how exciting that is. And for us we're like the bird's eye view. We're just watching it. And I can't express enough how appreciative we are of your voice and your authenticity. And you're very approachable. You're very transparent and you're very real. And I think that is what is really lighting a fire with all of us, that if and when this can be available for us one day, to see it happening with you and to see how it's for you to make that decisions. Did you have any hesitation? And I know you probably answered this on many shows prior to this one. Did you have any hesitation? Was it maybe this, in this drug that you're talking about, they call it the Tego? Am I saying, okay,
Yes,
so the
so you
Tego,
don't have to say tegoprubart every time, we can just call it Tego, otherwise
Tego.
it will be a 3-hour podcast if we have to say tegoprubart every
I
time,
keep
yeah.
pronouncing that name. But was that kind of like, okay, this sounds a lot more doable, both physically, emotionally, as far as what a transplant could do for the remainder of your life? Was that a deciding factor to have a drug with this possibility? And of course, you're in a clinical trial, so you are testing this for not only the doctors and the scientists and what's happening in the labs, but you're also testing it for those of us who are just curious.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I wasn't particularly interested. There's a lot of cool clinical trials going on. And
Mhm.
so, and I'll make this caveat and say immunosuppressants aren't bad. They've saved countless lives over the years. And so it's always important for me to say, like, when we talk about immunosuppressants, they're not bad. They are saving lives. The problem is we've been using the same couple of immunosuppressants for the last 20 or 30 years, and we know the side effects for that. The hard part for people with type 1 is that it really makes it a trade off. If you have to have a heart transplant, immunosuppressants are no question, it's better.
Yeah.
But is it worth it if you are a well controlled type 1? Is it worth the trade off to have to take traditional immunosuppressant medication? Especially since traditionally, what it's kind of shown is that over the years, that medication kind of builds up and ends up creating toxicity to those very islet cells they're supposed to protect. And then your
Yeah.
islet cells burn out and you go back to having type 1 diabetes. And so, is that trade off worth it? Answer for most people is no. So that was my answer as well. And then when I really started researching and kind of went down the internet rabbit hole about this new medication, it's new in my trial being used for type 1s. The medication itself is not new. They've actually used it in kidney transplantation and had great success with that. That's one of the things that makes it really different. And that's one of the things I'm most excited about. It doesn't cause a lot of kidney damage and kidney strain. And so previously, people that had any sort of kidney issues wouldn't be candidates for an islet cell transplant because they couldn't take the immunosuppressant medication. But I was in phase 1 of the trial, and they're just about to start phase 2 of the trial, which is for people with type 1 diabetes and some form of kidney dysfunction. So that's another exciting step, is that it's opening this process up to a lot of people who otherwise would not have been an available procedure.
Yeah.
So I was excited about the medication, did tons of research on it. And so once you get the taste for what would it really be like to live without type 1, it's hard to come back from that.
Mm.
But I wasn't completely sold. And then I went to Chicago in May of last year and went to University of Chicago for like a week of testing before you can even get approved to be in the trial. And it was when I met Dr. Wachowski and the entire research team that I was sold, because these are people, they're not trying to get funding and they're not trying to make a name for themselves. Like, these people love their patients.
Mm.
They genuinely, a lot of these people have T1 kids, or they have type 1 themselves, or they've had an islet cell transplant. And so when you realize these are people that are on a mission to cure type 1, I absolutely trust them with my life. And so I did. So I did all of my medical
Mm.
testing in May of last year and ended up getting approved to be part of the trial, and feel very blessed to get to be a part of it.
Yeah, that's incredible, and that's a good example of feeling it. So the heart was there. They had a personal, and they continue to have a personal connection to seeing this through. That does make a difference in our decisions, doesn't it?
Yes,
Yes.
this is a true across the board. If you have a good care provider, whether it's your PCP or your endocrinologist, it makes a world of difference to feel like you really have someone who cares about you and is on
Yeah.
your side. And that's how I feel about the research team.
Yeah, absolutely. So, wide open question. What is life like for you right now? If you can kind of give an overview. So you just said you're off. So you've been off of basal since about a week after the initial
Yes,
transplant.
Since January 20th, I have been off
Okay.
of basal. Yeah.
It's funny how,
Not that I'm counting or
not
anything.
that you're right. Not that those dates are in the head by any reasons. It's interesting how we typically remember our diagnosis date.
Yeah.
For me, it was the day before Easter in 1982. And of course, Easter was on April 12th that day. And it's funny, I had to actually pull the calendar up recently. A couple of years ago, I did that because I didn't really know the date. Again, I was a kid. I wasn't paying attention to the date. I just knew it was the day before Easter. So I looked back, 1982, when was the day of Easter? It's
Yeah.
funny. But, it's,
Diagnosis day, I remember
yeah,
mine. And mine, unlucky day, 3/13/13. So not a good, I mean, that
yeah.
I should have
Super,
seen that
super special.
diagnosis coming, right? Not a good day to go to the doctor.
Right. Was it a Friday too?
It was not a Friday. No, I think it was like, still have to go back and look at what day. It was like a Tuesday or a Wednesday.
Gotcha.
Middle of the week, thought I had the flu, went in, came out with a life-changing diagnosis, like
Right.
most of us on diagnosis day.
It sure was. It sure was. And you just shared that you've been off of so you started with kind of ditching the basal insulin, so that's no longer. So how was that as far, it's funny that you say that because I would think just living with diabetes that, and again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, I'm just thinking through this, that I would think they would have kept you on a basal because that would just kind of hold you. They did just the opposite, which is interesting. So how did that must just have been almost like going back to diagnosis, kind of relearning your body, I think, right?
Yeah. So the
Yeah.
team follows you really closely, especially like those 4 weeks right after transplant, because that is when those islet cells are really gearing up. So when I tell you your insulin needs change day by day by day, it's literally day by day. So one thing, I'd had my transplant on the 13th and I went back on the 20th I was still in Chicago. I went back for my follow-up visit before I flew home and I had been going low overnight. And Dr. Wachowski, who runs the entire program, he has my Dexcom on his phone. He watches it like a hawk. And so he had noticed I was going low and he said, okay, we'll just cut out basal. We're just not gonna, let's try just not doing that and see what happens. So casually. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just words you don't think you're going to hear.
Yeah.
The interesting piece of that is they took me off basal, and I'm glad you brought this up actually. They took me off basal, but even though I had functioning islet cells and even though they would have kept my blood sugar in check, I actually stayed on kind of a preventative dose of insulin for the first couple of months post-transplant. Islet cells take about 3 months to fully mature once you've had your
Um,
transplant. So the goal is to take a little bit of kind of supportive insulin before you eat, give it time to kick in, let your blood sugar start dropping, and then eat whatever you're going to eat so that you don't stress those islet cells out while you're trying not to overwork them while they're establishing
uh,
blood flow. And so the interesting part with that, and I feel like everyone can understand this as a type 1, we all try to pre-bolus so carefully. The interesting piece is that several times I would think I did a good job pre-bolusing, but I didn't wait long enough. And so I would have a blood sugar spike from whatever I ate. And then my islets would also kick in, not realizing there's outside insulin on board. And then that would send me low. So the first few weeks post-transplant were like, when I tell you it was just different every day, but it was also really incredible. Even being off basal insulin, all of a sudden my Dexcom, like probably most people's, it was like a roller coaster, depending on the day and hormones and all the different things, stress levels. And all of a sudden I have this islet cell transplant and there's just this beautiful straight line, barely any. And I thought, is this what it used to be like before? Because I never wore a CGM before. I never looked at
oh,
that.
okay.
And so getting to have that and see that almost instant, it was incredible, life-changing.
Yeah, it's like the 2 were working side by side, of like the big sister, little sister thing, and kind of filling in the gaps. Was Yeah, okay, that yeah, makes sense when you think about really how those cells have to get in, they have to assimilate into the body, and like you say, mature. Yeah,
Right.
that makes sense, that makes sense. And I guess any other sort of, like to over you gave a good example of, the timing, gosh, it's all about timing, right? So and it's so funny
You would
when you
think I
were
would be better
yeah.
at it after all these years, right? You'd think I'd be a pro, but there I was still struggling to get my pre-bolus just right.
Yeah, yeah. Goes to show you, right? Yeah, yeah. That was just your exit.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we're gonna make sure you don't forget what this life is like with diabetes. On your way, it's gonna be really good soon, but on your way out, we're gonna sure love that. So what do you think, as far as like your labs? I'm sure these are all things that are happening. I have seen some of your graphs like on social when you've shared and your A1C is like in the fives right now, the low fives. Are you still wearing a CGM?
Yes. So I
Yeah,
do still wear I don't take any insulin, but I do still wear a CGM because they use that for the trial to track data
that
on
makes
how I react to
sense.
things. And what's funny about that, I told you Dr. Rakowski, has all of his patients, watches us. So the other night, I had a compression low in the middle of the night, and I got a text from him at midnight that it said I was like at 55. And I had already gotten up and I'd done a finger prick and I was
Yeah.
at like 92. I was fine. And so I get this text message and he said, "Is this low real?" And I was like, "No, no, 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 no. Everything's fine." And so when I tell you they really stay on you. So they track my CGM data. And one of the craziest pieces coming out of this, Melissa, I knew that this would help with the highs, right? Like that's the point of getting those beta cells in there. I had never thought through the life changing impact of not going low all the time. That is the thing that has been the most radically life changing, wonderful. It's wonderful not to have to worry about carbs or carb count or any of those things, but being able to exercise and go ride bikes with my kids, being able to sleep through the night without going low or having to get up and correct. Those are the things that have had the absolute biggest impact on my life so far.
I can see that. Yeah. It's almost like a boundary thing. I mean, right now you're just feeling safer.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
and I'm
yeah.
a person who, I have hypoglycemia unawareness, and so I don't always feel it when I go low. So I'm a person who hasn't slept without a CGM I mean, basically since I got it right after diagnosis. I've had one on 24/7, and so multiple times post-transplant, now that I have my beta cells, which are making my insulin, and my alpha cells, which are making my glucagon, just keeping everything in balance for me. A couple of times I'll have a bad CGM spot, or the other night I took a shower and had taken mine off and just forgot to put one on and was able to just sleep through the night. Full confidence knowing I wasn't going to go low and I wasn't going to wake up really high the next morning. And so it's those victories that really, really change your perspective on what a big deal this is.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is this is a good segue to talk about your daily life. I mean, meals. I mean, this is interesting. This morning I decided to have a piece of toast with my eggs and greens, right? And I was actually telling the story to that same client that I had mentioned earlier. And it's at the decision we make. I was like, okay, today I'm feeling it. I'm really craving a piece of bread. And I pre-bolused, thought I had covered it. It did kind of put me up about 150, 160 for almost 2 hours. And, it is what it was. It was one of those things. It was obviously a piece of bread that was going to stick around a little bit longer. It was something different. I had to think about it. But, just knowing that, and I think when we can kind of understand the why when our blood sugar is responding a certain way, it sure does help. And you could probably relate to this too. All those things, whether it was hormonally driven or stress driven, where, it was hard to explain to yourself, why something went high or low. So what is mealtime for you like right now? Are you doing anything a little bit different?
Yeah, so the first couple of months post-transplant, I tried to eat lower carb, I should say, to help kind of protect those islets to make sure I didn't have a huge spike. So I did eat lower carb. And since then, I'm here at month 3 and I've just been just living a life. And so for those of you like me who've been living with type 1 for a very long time, let me explain the difference because you have probably forgotten. So the coolest part has been going to the restaurants where we always used to go and ordering that. Here's the impact. Type 1 Katie Beth would go sit down at my favorite restaurant and I would have 150 decisions. And I'd gotten really good at
Yeah,
making those, right? Like
yeah,
it
yeah,
becomes this algorithm that runs in the back of your brain. So what do I want? What am I having to drink? Are we going to order an appetizer? I need to go ahead and pre-bolus for that.
yeah,
Now, what do I want to eat? But what is my blood sugar right now? But also, we're not going to sit down. We're going to go walk around for a while after this. So I need to be mindful that I don't take, so there's
yeah,
all these decisions that go into something as simple as ordering food. So
yeah.
now we go to the same restaurant and I sit down and I think to myself, what looks good to me?
Hmm.
And that's it. Not what can I have? Not where is my blood sugar right now? Not what are we going to do after this? Not if I want to order something else to eat on a whim. I'm not running calculations for that. I just sit down and make a choice based on what looks good.
Ah, I like that. So what looks good? What are you feeling? What are you craving? We can say craving if we want to, but what are we feeling instead of what does my blood sugar need?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. What am I
Yeah,
craving? What looks good
yeah,
to me? What am I in the mood for today? Yeah. Very different from before.
yeah. Or maybe the other question is, what does my blood sugar not need? Which is,
Yes.
again, that's the condemning that, that we can't have something, just, again, based on what we think the outcome is. So it changes. Are you feeling your relation? It sounds like your relationship with food has changed.
It's
Yeah,
interesting. There are a lot of foods that I'm having to kind of revisit because there are foods in my head that I thought I don't like donuts. I don't like pizza. And now I'm having to go back through and say, okay, do I actually not like that food? Or did I not like the way that food made me feel? Did I not like the way that food sent me on a roller coaster? Did I not like it in my head because I knew that it wasn't worth the all day
yeah.
problems it was going to cause for me? So, very interesting. I still don't love donuts. I don't. And they're too sweet for me. And then pizza's really good. Definitely been eating more of that, and my husband, that's his favorite food, so he's thriving. He couldn't be more excited about my new love of pizza.
He can eat the pizza and not have to look sideways or guilty, right?
Yes.
And this obviously changed the dynamics of your home with children. Correct me if I'm wrong, but is your husband firefighter?
Yes, and
Medic.
that's him right back there in the frame that you can see actively fighting fires. Yes, so he's a firefighter. So that was one thing that was really great is that and before he was a firefighter, he was actually an EMT. And so when it came to diabetes and my care, like nothing freaked him out. I was already diabetic before we ever met. Nothing freaked him out. Nothing, when I say I'm high or I'm low, he knows exactly how to treat an emergency.
Yeah,
Our kids are older now and they all know and I hate that for them. None of them have type 1, thank goodness. But they know they've been impacted from
yeah,
type 1. They
yeah.
know what it means to have to wait because we can't go for our walk right now because my blood sugar's low. So I have to eat something and wait before we can do the next activity.
Mhm.
I wish I could say they'd never found me unconscious in the living room before, but that happened one time. And so my
Mm,
kids were impacted by type 1. And I always try to explain for people without a type 1 in their lives, like a child doesn't get diagnosed, a person doesn't get diagnosed, like a family gets diagnosed
yes,
with type 1 because it
absolutely.
really impacts everybody in the family because we're all managing it and treating it and being aware of it in different ways. But I'm
Yes.
very blessed. I'm very, very blessed in that my family is super supportive and
Yeah,
my husband has a medical background that he just takes it all in stride.
yeah. Well, I'm gonna tell you something that you may not know. My husband, David, he's a retired firefighter, EMT, and he lives with type 1 diabetes.
No way. That is so
Yes,
cool.
ma'am.
It's so cool.
So, yeah, he was here on the show probably about 2 months ago. I finally got him on here. And so, yes, I can relate to everything you said. And what a special relationship that is, obviously, for somebody. And it's funny because a lot of people say, "Oh, that's gotta be the best thing in the house." So I'm like, "Well, sometimes, sometimes not." Yeah.
He's had my Dexcom on his phone as
Just got to
well,
share.
that he monitors, because I don't always wake up in the night, and he finally deleted it off the other day because there's no risk, and so that's a big deal as well.
Ooh, just yeah, 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 just the ability to let go and just to say,
Mm,
"Okay, she's good." Yeah,
yeah.
that's awesome, awesome. I'm gonna ask a big question that may sound kinda odd. Insulin's impact on our body. How are you feeling as a woman? Hormones. And again, you can get as personal as you want to. We don't need all the details, but anything that you're comfortable with. One of the things I know, especially when we're getting older with the hormones dropping and the cycles affect us, and I'm sure you experience this through your hormonal change. Again, monthly cycles, pregnancies, postpartum, all of that. Because our average listener is 40 and above, but definitely still in the same sort of generation as you. And maybe it's still too early for you to really understand what it's doing with your body or how your body's responding to the fact that insulin is your pancreas is now doing the work. Those islet cells are now doing the work. Have you noticed any shifts in your body? Um,
Yeah,
anything
so
like that?
yes is the short
Yeah.
answer to that.
Yeah.
So one thing that I struggled with, like most women living with type 1, and I love that this is something that you talk about on your podcast because it's something I don't feel like gets talked about enough for women, is the effect of hormones on type 1. So I was definitely a woman who I always told my husband, like, the week before my cycle, I have type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Like, I have type 1 and then I have this insulin resistance that is through the roof, and it's so crazy. And then the moment my cycle starts, so everything corrects and you have to change all of your stats on
Yep.
the amount of insulin you're taking, right? So it's constantly changing. And so that was something I've dealt with for 13 years. And now it's been interesting just the last couple of months seeing the difference of my body being able to just handle those fluctuations on their own. And so if I do have some sort of insulin resistance leading up to that, like, my body just kind of kicks in and tapers that. So I still have, all the other hormonal side effects, but I'm not fighting my blood sugar on top of that.
Yeah.
And so I'm friends with several other T1s, and we joke about how, the week before you're stressed and you feel so bloated and yucky. And then you have your blood sugar hits 400 for no reason. And
Mm,
it just makes you feel so out of control in every single way. And you're frustrated and you're angry, and then your
mhm.
cycle starts and everything kind of resets and you're like, "Oh yeah, that's what that was."
I
So
know.
I've really enjoyed not having to deal with that as much,
Yeah.
like, and noticed a difference now that my body's functioning the way that it was intended to.
Yeah. And what's, again, this is a very selfish response to, or just kind of response to what you're experiencing in just a couple months and what you're realizing and what you're feeling different with. It compounds what we go through, women with insulin dependent diabetes. So, because you're an experiment on that level too. So I appreciate you sharing that because again, it's validation that we're not crazy. You knew that it was something that was truly a roller coaster based on your hormonal cycle and how just a few months later, and it's probably going to continue to improve because you're definitely on the uptake as far as what those islet cells are doing for you. I love that. That is, that needs to be part of the research that they are. There is some research going on with all of this. It's kind of behind the scenes. T1D Exchange is one company that's definitely looking at women's hormones and the impact of it. And I appreciate that. It's very affirming. And yeah, we'll continue to learn more as time goes on. Just how all this is kind of hitting you. Yeah, for sure, or not hitting you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's really cool to see how incredible the human body watching it function the way it was created to function.
yeah,
And I think it's such a different perspective because we talked a little bit about this before we started the recording. I never paid attention to my blood sugar before I was diagnosed with diabetes, and I never paid attention to a lot of these different things because my body just did it on its own. And then you get diagnosed with type 1, and all of a sudden there are all of these different things that you really are so hyper aware of that you pay attention to all the time. And then going through this process, not having to deal with those things anymore, getting to watch my body react very naturally to exercising for an hour or
Mm,
all of these different things. It's really cool to see how the human body is created to work when it's
yeah.
able to function like it's
When
like
it's
it's
able.
supposed to.
Yeah, yeah. It's a definitely a before and after for you in another whole level because yeah, you obviously lived with this disease for 13 plus years. So you knew what all that felt and looked like on a graph or just how you felt in it. But now you're on the other side experiencing it's kind of like revisiting what your body did created, when you were born, when you were a teenager, when you were in your 20s and I always say that we are, especially women, I think the cycles have a lot to do with this, just our hormonal changes throughout our lifetime. One of the advantages, I believe, is that if we choose to, we are conscientious of how we feel.
Yes.
And sometimes we have data that can help or confirm or, validate that. I th- Personally, I think that's our superpower, as we're aging, is that we have to look closer. We choose to look closer. And then again, if we're responding to the feedback that our body's giving us, our data is giving us, I think we've got a kind of a level up on, the average person, just based on that. You're so in tuned anyway. I can tell that, just in the short time I've gotten to meet you, you're very in tune and with your body and how you feel. Um, yeah, it's incredible. It's a really neat story.
Yeah. Sometimes
Yeah.
I think it is kind of a superpower, like you said, because like I would always know I was getting sick before I really showed the first symptom because I would see some of these smaller signs, watch my blood sugar start to spike. And so, in a lot of ways, I'm so much more in tune with my body and my overall health because I'm paying attention to it because
Yeah.
I have to keep myself alive. And
Yeah.
so while that's a horrible burden for anyone to bear, it's also in some ways a gift. Certainly now that I'm not having to, manage insulin and highs and lows on top of
Yeah.
everything else. Yeah.
Woo. Nice. Well, but, before we go to, I've got a couple more questions, but I do want to talk about some news that's happening. And as we're recording, we're early April, as we're here talking together. FDA, the RFK Jr., just all of those biggies that we know that are in there doing some changes and making things happen. So, like for instance, Dr. Marty McCary, so he's the FDA, head of the FDA. I'm a big fan of his. He's done a lot for the hormonal awareness lately. Again, it's been the last year's been pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, he is on it. I really, really like and respect him. So what is happening with, and this just was announced. So they're reevaluating the drug approval, and you might be able to explain this better than I do, the process of drug approval, especially when it's as far as the speeding up of the process of it. So what's happening there?
Yeah. So this is, and I try to tell people this is a really good thing. So drug approval in the United States is a very slow process compared to other countries. And so the hard challenge that the FDA is facing is how do we speed up that process to make us more competitive without sacrificing safety? And so that was kind of the goal of the FDA presentation that they put out earlier this week was to say we are looking at this process start to finish. So for example, the trial that I'm in, the medication that I'm on, tegoprubart. So, I'm in phase 1 of the trial. They're about to start phase 2 of the trial. Then there will have to be a phase 3 of the trial, and then it would go for FDA approval. And so there's a lot of other pieces on top of those things. There's the IRB, which is the Institutional Review Board, and they're important. We don't want to get rid of them because they're looking at all the data, making sure everything is safe. They review things that have any trials that are using humans they are a part of. But sometimes it takes a while to get them recruited. So one of the things Dr. McCary was talking about was how do we speed up that part of the process? Not getting rid of it, But, do we help them recruit? Do we bring in outside contractors? Do we offer to pay to get people to do this type of thing? Like, how do we speed up that part? So that's one thing. And there were like 5 different things in the process he talked about. So that was one. And they're talking about running kind of concurrent trials where actually patients like me that are in a trial would give permission to share my real time data with the FDA as it's coming through. So there wouldn't be that lag time. It would cut out a lot of basically time. How do we get this information as safely as possible, as quickly as possible? That's the goal. So all of those things that Dr. McCary talked about, fantastic. And then the thing that kind of blew my mind is at the very end of his presentation, and it's an hour long, it's on YouTube if you want to go watch the whole thing. But at the very end, he said, our goal in the next couple of years is to create functional cures or a full cure for type 1 and also for ALS. And then there were some gastrointestinal issues in there as well that he talked about. And so just hearing someone who's the commissioner of the FDA say, hey, we see that type 1 is a problem. We recognize that, and we're going to do everything we can to really put a focus on that. Like, I hope every type 1 and every type 1 parent feels so encouraged by the fact that
Yeah.
this is really getting some media attention and some support from people who can really make a positive impact for us.
Yeah. 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 Amen to that. Yeah. People that are definitely, again, their heart is in it. They're seeing the benefits, the long-term benefits. And again, this is obviously, like you said, it's gonna take time to see how this plays out, how long it takes out. But I think the fact that they're talking about it, that it's top of the list, it seems like it's right there at the top of the list, which is, oh, that's very humbling. I love that. Very, really good. So what about the islet cells? So we want, ideally, we want to get these classified as organs and not as experimental drugs. It threw me.
It's
Yeah.
so odd, and it's so people
Yeah.
are so confused by that, and I'm like, "You should be confused because it doesn't make any sense."
Doesn't make any sense, yeah.
So, the United States is, like, the only first world country out there that classifies cadaveric islet cells. So, those are islet cells that come from an adult deceased organ donor. So, a lot of times, if they have a pancreas and it's not needed for a full pancreas transplant, those just get thrown out.
Yeah.
And so, because islet cells, which are pulled from the donor pancreas, because those got classified as an experimental drug, it really puts limits on being able to get and use those islets. And there's a lot of different ways this impacts research. So the big deal is obviously the research. So like for cadaveric islet cells like mine came from a deceased organ donor, and it was very expensive for the trial to pay for that to get those. My insurance doesn't cover it because insurance doesn't cover experimental drugs. Insurance would cover organs, especially since in talking with Dr. Rakowski and Dr. Ricordi and a lot of the really big scientists in the space have talked to insurance companies and explained like covering this type of procedure is going to save you so much in the long run because there aren't ER visits and it's
Yeah.
not pumps every month and insulin and the long term, hopefully everyone is very well controlled and there are no issues that come from having type 1. But we all know that that doesn't happen. There's kidney issues, there's retinopathy, there's amputations, there's
Yeah.
so many scary things that come with having type 1 that are also really expensive for insurance companies to cover.
Yeah.
And so, one reason this would be a huge to get these cadaveric islets reclassified is because it opens up a lot of opportunity for more research. So, like right now, our trial had enough money to cover 10 and then eventually 12 people. So, if islets had been reclassified already as an organ instead of as an experimental drug, they could have done 100 patients first round.
Interesting. Okay,
And
those are the
so,
details we don't know. Okay.
so it opens up so more people getting treatment, that's great. But then also imagine how much more research and information they can pull out of 100 patients
Yeah,
versus 12. So
absolutely.
that's one big piece. And one thing I like to explain to people is, cadaveric islets aren't going to be the answer for all of us because there aren't enough. There's like 2 million people living with type 1 in the United States. And so this is a huge stepping stone, but it's the next piece in the puzzle. Research like the trial that I'm in can't happen unless there's access to these cadaveric islets. And so there is a bill and it was in the Senate. There's also a matching companion in the House, like just recently that they
Mhm.
did.
Mhm.
And it's called the Islet Act. And
Mhm.
so the purpose of that is to reclassify cadaveric islets as an organ instead of a drug. And then the other option is with the new rules, RFK Jr. actually has the ability as HHS secretary to go ahead and reclassify that. Like he can just decide. It wouldn't have to go through Congress. There wouldn't have to be, he can just change it. And so when you see me tag him in all of my videos
Right.
and things like that, that's why. He actually has the ability to come through and just make that reclassification. And there are a lot of people working on the data and the argument for why that needs to be the case.
Yeah.
The sad part is our country we have the scientists, we have the technology, we have the infrastructure to be making all these leaps and bounds. And our researchers are trying to fight this with their hands tied behind their back because they have trouble getting access to these cadaveric islet cells. So
Yeah.
that's why that islet reclassification, the Islet Act, HHS secretary, that's why you hear type 1s talking about that all the
Yeah.
time, because that is
Absolutely.
the next piece of the puzzle for us.
That's right. We need to raise our voices, don't we?
Yeah.
Yes. And that could be something easily that we could link here in the show notes too for people to find out more about the Islet Act, basically. To is this a what am I trying to say? I've got survey on my head, but not a survey, but a kind of something that they can sign to raise awareness, or is it
Yeah.
about
So the best thing that they can do is there's actually a list right now. It's in the help committee in the Senate. And so there's actually a list of senators. If you are from their state, email all of them anyway. But
yeah.
if you are one of their constituents, that holds a lot of weight.
Hmm.
Reaching out to these people and saying, please champion this for us and push this through. It would make such a difference.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, the next piece is getting this reclassified so that we can get some of the research done for trials just like the one I'm in.
Right, right, for trials to continue. So tell us about where you are right now, because we just learned you're about 3 months in, and you're still getting the Tega.
The tech,
Is it a shot or is it a booster? Maybe it's details I can't keep in my head, but I understand that you get it once a month, right?
yes. So
Okay.
it's very confusing. So
Yeah.
the islet cell transplant happens once, sometimes
Mhm. Mhm.
twice if patients need a second one.
Okay.
But the islet cell transplant happens once. So I had that done in January. And then I go in every 21 days. And remember, I'm the lab rat. So this would not be the process for everyone. But I go in every 21 days and get tons of blood work drawn so that they can run all the little tests to see how I'm doing. And then I get an IV. So it's actually an IV
Okay.
infusion. It takes about an hour. And what's funny is I work virtually just like this. And so I take my computer with me. I do it all in one day. I fly from Little Rock directly to Chicago. I go to the research center. They hook me up. I sit there and do Zoom meetings and all of these different things. And then I take my direct flight back and I'm home for dinner with my kids.
Love it.
So it's it's not something everyone can do, right? Because right now most people could not take off work every 21 days or
Right.
leave their young
Right.
kids every 21 days or whatever that might be. But that's the standard for the trial. They're already working, there's already research that shows you can actually go a lot longer than 21 days.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then they're also working on making the Tego more lifestyle friendly. So they're working on like a subcutaneous injection that you could just do at home. And
Okay.
so I try to let people know, like, if this gets FDA approved,
Yeah.
number one, this is going to be an exciting treatment for a lot of people. I think probably with a host of immune, people maybe that have already had a kidney transplant or things like that
Mm.
that are going to want to switch over. But I think the next steps for Tego will be you'll see them making it more lifestyle friendly
That
because
makes
we can't
sense.
all be bopped to Chicago, thousands of people, and show up and ask Dr. Wachowski for an IV every 21 days. It's
Right. Right.
not practical for most people, but cool.
Yeah.
That's the commitment that you make. And
Yeah.
I'm very blessed that my work is super supportive. And I've had multiple meetings like from the research room with like my IV in my arm, and my team doesn't think anything of it. And
Yeah.
my husband keeps the home fires burning while I'm gone. And so
Perfect.
clinical trials aren't for everyone, and
Right.
not everyone is able to do it, but I feel very blessed that I am in a phase of life where I can
Right,
do that.
right. Yeah, yeah. Again, timing is perfect, right? Perfect, perfect. I love it. So right now, I mean, you're just kind of going through. I mean, this is where you are, with what you're doing. Time will tell, and how you're feeling is going to kind of show. And because they're continuing to learn from you, which is the whole point of a clinical trial. And it's just incredible. It's a fun process. And again, we love the fact that we get to, just to witness, just to witness. I appreciate that. Nice.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, I think the reason this trial got so much attention is because it's a privately funded trial. So we're allowed to talk about it. And so for a long time as T1s, we hear in the news all the time, like, oh, they've cured it in China, but then you never hear anything else about it, or they've cured it wherever. And then you look at the article and they've like cured it in a mouse. And you're like, oh, cool. And so I think the neat part about this is like the research is coming out and the doctors far smarter than I am are saying, here's the research, here's the numbers, here's the statistics.
Yeah.
But then the next thing that you scroll to is like a video of me like hiking through the woods showing you what my blood sugar actually looks like,
Mm,
or a video of one of the other patients who works in a doctor's office and is doing that without a mask and living his best life.
gotcha.
So I think that's one reason this trial is so exciting. It's pulling patients off insulin very systematically, and it's doing it in a way where people can actually see what that looks like. So for a
Mm,
lot of us skeptical T1s, I think for the first time, maybe people are starting to think, maybe some of this research is real. And it's not just this trial. There are so many other really cool things going on. So I try to tell people I'm like one piece of a puzzle piece in a much larger puzzle. And so there are people attacking this issue of type 1 from all different sides. And I tell people we're living in an era where the science is finally catching up to the dream for a cure. And that's what makes me so excited.
good stuff. I love it. So if you don't mind sharing, how is your faith? How has it carried you through this whole process? I mean, even from diagnosis to deciding to, to join this trial, to the healing process right now.
I am a believer and I accepted Christ when I was 8 years old. And, when I got diagnosed at 26, I prayed for like miraculous healing or for the doctors to be wrong or prayed for all these miracles. They didn't come. And that was okay. And, my faith really sustained me through that because I didn't really understand why, but I did believe that God had a plan. So fast forward all these years, I really felt a diagnosis that type 1 was going to come in and very much limit my life and limit my ability to achieve these things I dreamed of, and it didn't. So I wasn't just surviving with type 1. I was thriving. I have a career I love. I travel. I've got husband. I've got kids. All things I wanted, I did with type 1. So I try to remind people life wasn't bad when I had type 1. It's better now. So my faith really played a role in just getting through diagnosis, really believing there's a reason for this somewhere. Never thought it would be this. And then all of these years later, all of a sudden, here I am as a part of this trial. And I find myself on the internet making videos and encouraging people, I hope, and educating people who don't know anything about type 1 or the daily struggle of that. And so on the other side of type 1, I can actually look back and look at that as a blessing because it made me who I am and it
Mm,
got me to where I am. And I see that in hindsight. A lot of times, and this is not just true for type 1, throughout my life, you can't see God's plan until you reach the end of it and look back. And then it's so clear. It's so obvious. But at the time on diagnosis day, it didn't feel like a blessing. And it didn't feel like a blessing in the sense. Now I'm very thankful for that journey because it grew me into the woman that I am. And then it allowed me to be part of something like this. And I hope and pray that I'll get to play at least a small part changing the future. I look at these young kids living with type 1 and I'm like so hopeful for them. And I'm thankful to get to play even a small role in that. And my faith is what has sustained me through that the whole time.
I love that. Yes, yes. Yes, through the hard things for sure. Yeah. Yeah, and that is so true too. When we're in it, when we're feeling it, even if we're faith-filled, it's still hard. And that's when we really have to abide and, stick close and trust, right? And, be willing to surrender. I know that's something I worked through in my earlier days. I fought this disease as a teenager and even in my 20s, and just knowing that there was a purpose in it. It took me a while to figure that out, but I'm sure glad I discovered that because it does bring peace and a lot more just understanding as to why we're here. And, because we're all faced with something, sometimes more than one thing, that are going to challenge us and make us stronger for sure. So if there's women listening who feel exhausted, and so you're on the other side of exhausted. You're probably exhausted by a few things, but as far as the day to day with blood sugar and managing that, but if they're feeling exhausted right now and they are, and I love the fact that there is some things to look forward to, even if and when it's going to be available for everybody. Those are things we don't know yet, but just knowing that they're working hard. There's people like you that are putting their time and willing to test this out for us so that we can all learn from it and to see what happens in the future. But what would you say to that lady? It's like my client that I mentioned to you before, she was diagnosed at 3
Mm.
and she's about your age and she's exhausted. And, so what would you say to something like that that's just,
I would say, so one of the blessings that's happened kind of through all of this that it's spiraled. I've not only gotten to work with the research team at University of Chicago, I've gotten to go down to the Diabetes Research Institute in Miami and meet a lot of those researchers. Actually got to meet Dr. Ricordi, who invented the Ricordi chamber, which is what they still used to isolate the islet cells that I had in my transplant, and Dr. Kenyon, who was like instrumental in creating the tegoprubart that I used to protect my islets. And so they gave me like a big tour of the lab with all of these different doctors and all of these different things. And even at University of Chicago under Dr. Wachowski, this is like one of 3 trials that he's running. And so I think the thing that I would say to me, to type 1 Katie Beth, to your client, to the woman out there who's still slugging through this, number 1, it's very valid that you're tired. Coming out on the other side of this, I did not really realize the amount of day to day mental strain that diabetes had on me and mental energy that it took from me because you just get so good at it, especially as a woman. It just runs in the background. And so, if that's your life and you're feeling tired and you're feeling burnout, all I can say is there's my trial, and there are dozens of others attacking this thing from all sides. And I know it's so easy to be skeptical, and that is okay. But I hope that you know that there really are people out there like fighting for us. Like
Mhm.
I've seen the labs, I've met the doctors, I've seen the research, and I think they let me wander through, Melissa, because they knew I wouldn't be smart enough to like spill any trade secrets. But
Got it.
if you're scared and tired and burnout and not feeling hopeful about the future, I hope that you can take a deep breath and know that truly, like, I really genuinely believe that brighter days are ahead for all of us. Certainly for the young kids growing up,
Yeah.
but I think for the women in our generation as well. It's not gonna be tomorrow, and so my other piece of that is the healthier you can keep yourself, the more you can keep your blood sugar in check, the more you can eat the right foods and exercise and take good care of your
Yeah.
health, the easier procedures like the one I have are. And so I qualified for this trial because I had paid attention and tried to take really good care of myself for all of these years. And so continue to do all the things you're doing now, but realize that there really might be a day when you don't have to anymore. I think that we are on the forefront of seeing things that I never thought we would see in our lifetime. And I think that will certainly be true for kids, and I believe that will be true for the average women in my generation and older as well.
And that's a perfect way to thank you for being here. You have a really nice way to tie it up. And that advice goes for all people living with diabetes too. I know a lot of our listeners are women and, in a little bit older generation, but it applies to the mothers with children with T1D, and I really appreciate that. Yeah, that's a really good way to share the hope. So, if they haven't connected with you yet, how can our listeners find you, Katie?
Yes. Well, I am. If you want to follow along with my journey, and like I said, there's lots of trials out there and lots of participants as well. But if you want to follow along with my updates and see all the pretty graphs and things that I show from time to time, I am on TikTok and Instagram as Calamity Katie Beth. And then I'm just Katie Beth Hand on Facebook. And I'm friending everybody back willy nilly. So you can just shoot me a message, and I try to answer as many questions as I can. I am a mom of four and full time working, and so I don't
Sure.
always get to answer as many questions as I'd like to. But anytime somebody sends me a message, I always try to answer that. So I'm happy to answer any questions anyone
Well,
has.
we appreciate that. And I'll be sure to link that right here in the show notes, along with some information about the Islet Act. I'll put that in the show notes as well, just to direct people to get this thing going.
Perfect. I appreciate it. Well, thank you
Right.
so much for having me. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
You are welcome. And be sure to share this episode with somebody else you know that wants an update on what Katie Beth is doing and how she's healing. Again, we will be back in here same time next week. Have a beautiful day.